They've given us a funding letter where they said we're basically in the final portions of due diligence and we'll be able to give you a funding date in the next 2 weeks. So this has been a long process of about 13 months of due diligence, and now we're at the point where we can finally go ahead and make our plans to go public as a company, because our chief financial officer, our original chief financial officer, Richard Barber, is the former CFO of Bank of America. And Richard always preaches to us one mantra: keep your stock float very small, and yet at the same time, develop a significant income stream. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we purport to put up the first plant in Wheeling, West Virginia. We have everything already identified, the site's already been approved, everything is ready to go, and that first site will take a 20,000 barrel a day plant. Sounds a little bit small, but the net profit that comes back to Reliable One Resources from processing 20,000 barrels a day at this plant is $362 million. So our stock float is still only 31 million shares. Relative to Wall Street standards, it's an inordinately small stock float. We've only sold 16 million. We only have 16 million shares outstanding. We have financed all of our R&D, all of our overhead, all of our legal. Everything's been fabricated by the engineers. All of it's been done with our accredited investors. We have no highly dilutive venture capital or private equity, and that's wonderful because none of our individual partners are going to get diluted. When the big money from the bank comes in, which they've now approved us for $216 million on the first tranche, but this is the one condition they put on it, is when they saw the efficacy of the technology and they saw the price that we were doing it at, they said, we want the first right of refusal to do the first 4 plants. Well, that's going to work out for us very well because there's 18,000 natural gas wells in Pennsylvania. We're going to need approximately 4 plants to take care of those 18,000 natural gas wells in Pennsylvania. Once we do that, we can spread out to the rest of the country, because in the United States they have 38,169 saltwater injection wells and disposal wells to put this water back into the ground. But not one EPA official, not one part of the citizenry, not one politician wants those saltwater injection wells extant, save for the fact it was the only game in town. But now that there's an environmentally safe and cost-effective way to do it, we believe that the saltwater injection wells will ultimately be legislated out of existence, because there isn't any downside to this technology. So the next step for us is to go ahead and put up the first plant right there in Wheeling, and then the bank wants to do it this way. They want to put the second plant up when we're breaking ground, when we're processing our first barrel of water on plant number 1. They want us to break ground on plant number 2, which will probably be in north central Pennsylvania. In northeast Pennsylvania, those guys are paying $16 a barrel because they are so far away from the nearest commercial saltwater injection wells in Ohio. It's a function of time and distance. So we are literally charging these producers and drillers $5 a barrel just to bring the water to us and drop it off. That's revenue stream number 1. The drillers, when they drill for their oil, they found out in 2018, if they can re-drill or refrac their wells with the same water chemistry as their original borehole, they get between 15 and 20% higher hydrocarbon yield than if they drill with water that's pulled out of the Ohio River, which is what they currently do now. Well, fortunately, our recycling plant not only cleans the water down to dischargeable levels, but we can hand the water back to them with the same water chemistry as their original borehole, which they will buy back for $1 a barrel. Revenue stream number 2. Now, when you drop off 20,000 barrels a day of produced water, that creates about 750,000 pounds of salt every day. Well, that's an awful lot to get rid of. But fortunately, in the United States, we need an inordinate amount of salt to go back on the roads as a traction control product. It's called Slicer. So now we have a third revenue stream. Instead of just getting rid of the salt, and something that was formerly a contaminant stream now becomes a revenue stream. And now we've got a major announcement to make, is now we're able to pull things out of the water that we never were able to pull out before, and that are the fines and the minerals that exist in the water as well. So we have 4 significant income streams that are coming in to the plant, which is yielding a net income back to Reliable of approximately $361 million per year. So the bank is going to get 25% net revenue own of whatever plant they underwrite. And they don't receive any stock in the parent company, which is very good for our original investors. They're very happy to hear that because their position is not going to be diluted. They'll get 25% net revenue owned in perpetuity. We'll put up the first 4, but after the first 4, we're free to go on our own and put up the rest. We feel that we could put up 100 in the next 10 years. 100 recycling plants will probably supplant and deal with 38,169 saltwater injection wells that exist predominantly in California, in Texas, in North Dakota, in Ohio. They're all over now, and they have the same deleterious effects to the environment and the same causes of the seismic activity. In fact, that seismic activity has now morphed all the way into Ohio, from Oklahoma, all the way up to Michigan. So now Ohio is saying, hey, we might not want any more water coming across state lines. So we really think that, ladies and gentlemen, we're poised to become the only game in town and to be able to win how the water is going to be dealt with in the natural gas industry. But for you to connect the dots, you know, as Richard Barber, our former CFO, used to always say, and now he's an advisor on our board, he says, keep the stock float small, keep the income as high as you possibly can. We're going to have 4 of these up in relatively quick succession. The income on one plant alone would produce an earnings per share of $6 per share. If you want to do the math, you know, Wall Street uses usually what? For a price earnings multiple? In the worst recession, they use 13 or 14. At times like this, they're using 21.5. Well, let's take the lowest. Let's take the absolute. Let's go down to 13 or 14. We're earning $6 per share on one plant because we have such a small stock float. Then this is the reason why we believe that this is an inordinately profitable opportunity for our partners right now. And our best beneficiaries are going to be original partners who are able to buy the stock at $1.50 because we plan to go public once the first plant has been producing for 3 months. Because Wall Street doesn't respect press releases or promises, but the one thing they do respect is empirical margins. Once the plant is up and running and they can verify the margins on that plant after 3 months of running, and they know that we have a commitment for the first 4, the 3 to go up right after the first one, then they're willing to connect the dots on what the IPO price should be. So that's the time we're going to pull the trigger on the IPO. We've already done the audited financials. Our president is a financial auditor of companies for the last 20 years. So we're really poised in the right direction. And finally, we now have the full commitment of the bank behind us. That is our oil-water separation technology. When we hired the team to do that and put that technology in place, we also started working on a desalination project because this is about filtering water. The desalination project has come a long way since we first talked to you in 2016. We are at a point right now where the last desalination test that we did, and I'll back up a little bit and tell you who is spearheading this. Our partner is Dr. Rahul Nair in India. He was the protege of Dr. Anton Novoselov, who won the Nobel Prize for inventing graphene at the University of Manchester in 2004. So this graphene is a very unique medium. Graphene is 200 times the tensile strength of steel, even only at 1 cell thick, 1 atom, a layer thick. But it also lends itself to being a good desalination medium because you can transfer the ions across and through the membrane. Long story short, we did a test of reverse osmosis versus the graphene membrane. Now, reverse osmosis is the technology that they use for almost all desalination today, but it's inordinately expensive because it relies on 4 different cartridges, they call them 4 different membranes that are wrapped around the spindle. And by design, what they do is they take these 4 membranes and they misalign the pores on the membranes, and then they flush volumes of water through the 4 membranes with misaligned pores, and they eventually sequester all the sodium, the calcium, and the magnesium chloride between the 4 membranes. But after every run of seawater, you literally clog your membrane system. Whatever amount of seawater we're trying to desalinate today, let's say 1 million gallons, we have to have 500,000 gallons of fresh water on the back end just to backflush it so we don't clog the system on every run. It starts to get very expensive because you need inordinate sums of electricity to push all that volume of water through those 4 cartridge spindles. So for economic reasons, it's not in the developing countries. That's why so much of the world right now is devoid of enough water. California has a water shortage that's precipitous right now. You saw what happened in South Africa? They just said that we're sitting on the tip where 2 oceans converge in Cape Town, and they're calling D-Day in 2019 where we're going to run out of fresh water. That's because even though RO is the extant choice of technology, it's too expensive in most developing countries. Our technology is based on graphene. We take the seawater from a high vantage point, and we have a conveyor belt that runs continuously at the bottom of a chamber. The seawater runs in from a higher vantage point. The conveyor belt is coated with our graphene membrane. As the seawater hits the graphene membrane, the pores are sized so that the only thing that can go through the pores are the sodium, is the H2O molecule, because it's the smallest. Everything else, especially the sodium, calcium, and magnesium ions, gets rejected off the top. So after every run of seawater, we're sitting there with a pile of chlorides on the belt. That gets air knifed off into its own separate vat and augered up, screw augered up to a container to process that as well, because we preserve the chloride whole, and that's valuable as long as you can. In reverse osmosis, all of that chlorides that get sequestered between the 4 cartridge membranes, it creates a sludge that has to be dealt with, and most of the time they just put that back into the ocean, and then you resalinate the ocean to inordinate levels where around the desalination plants you have a lot of coral and sea life dying. So there's 4 major knocks against reverse osmosis, even though it does work as far as producing potable water very well. But right now we're doing the graphene membrane technology is yielding the potable water at about 1/9 the energy cost of reverse osmosis. But we're doing it at a bench scale level. We have a machine that's about 34 inches wide and 8.5 feet long. That's how long the belt is. When we first got the test back, we have a graphic that I like to show you, but we're not using our slides today, so I'm going to describe this to you. The test showed that the cellulose triacetate membranes that are used in reverse osmosis showed a flux rate, and flux rate means this: how much water is traveling through 1 meter of belt in 1 hour. Well, when we did it using the cellulose triacetate membranes that are used in reverse osmosis versus our graphene membranes, we had 79 liters going through the graphene membrane in 1 hour versus 10 liters going through the triacetate cellulose membrane of reverse osmosis. The chloride rejection rate on the graphene membrane was at 12.5. We were rejecting more and more sodium, calcium, and magnesium chloride than all of the reverse osmosis cellulose triacetate membranes by a factor of about 4. So there wasn't any downside. There's only an upside to what we're doing with the graphene, except for one fact. The reason we couldn't commercialize it in 2018 is because the way that they created the pores in the actual belt was they took one layer of reduced graphene oxide flakes and they put another layer of reduced graphene oxide on top of it, And it was the nanotubes that were created between the two one-atom layers which sufficed and which were created as the pores. So even though it worked as a good flux rate, and even though it worked as a good chloride rejection rate, there was not a uniform flux rate. When you want to deliver a commercial system to a country, and you want to deliver a full commercial desalination system, you have to know exactly how much water is going through what area of belt in 1 hour. Well, fortunately, Dr. Nair has made a major breakthrough in the second generation, and we just got delivered the second generation of belts. And here's the big discovery, here's the big breakthrough. The pores are now standardized in size, and they're also uniformly spaced one from the other. So that's a big deal, because that's the code that everybody's trying to crack. And we have the opportunity to get an exclusive of receiving, it's called super nano graphene. So that is a big deal worldwide, and it's very philanthropic. But as investors, it pales in comparison to what it's going to make Reliable One Resources and its partners vis-a-vis our oil water separation technology. Because once we have the 3 plants up and running after the first one, you're talking about a very, very significant income stream with a very, very, very small stock. Today is what I'd like to leave you with is this. When is the last time, ladies and gentlemen, that you have seen your business enterprise where the winds on both the demand side and the supply side are blowing in the direction of your solution? And yet that's exactly what we have right now for Reliable One Resources and the oil water separation technology, because the current solution is being legislated out of existence. No politician, no EPA official, no citizen wants saltwater injection wells. And at the same time, Reliable is the only one with the current technology that's capable of cleaning water that's this salty. This water is 330,000 parts per million total dissolved solids. It's 10 times saltier than seawater. So whatever water you might think of, whatever technology you can think of, reverse osmosis, wastewater treatment technology, membrane technology, those technologies all foul out, egregiously so, when you're trying to deal with water that's any saltier than seawater. But this technology is robust enough to take it down to dischargeable levels and then hand it back to the farmer or give it back to the driller so he can re-drill and refrac with. So we're going to still offer our stock today as a private company to our partners at $1.50, because we got our start here literally 3 years ago with our Orlando Money Partners. And you literally, our partners from the Money Show put us on the map. So we want to give back to our partners just like they got us to where we are today. But once we get our funding, then we won't be coming back to the Money Show, so we probably won't see you next year. But I want to thank everybody that's always attended our shows, and also everybody that's invested with us. It's been a great ride. I think once we perfect this commercially and take the desalination technology to the rest of the world, but right now we're concentrating on rolling out the first plant where we can actually break the ground in April of 2019. So please meet us at booth number 611. We've got our brochures there. We make it very easy for our partners to invest. It's one stock subscription agreement right at the back. And then we're going to use the same transfer agent when we actually do our IPO as when we're doing our private stock. So it'll be a seamless transition. Once we go public, our transfer agent will notice everybody trade in your private shares for your IPO shares, and it'll be a seamless transition for our partners.
Does the weight, the salts you get out of the desalinization, does that have any commercial value?
Yes, because we can preserve them whole. That's the key. We're not creating a sludge because in our technology there isn't any middle. We're not getting any sludge because there's no middle between the membranes. We're rejecting all the chlorides off the top of the belt. So there's a very small percentage of sludge vis-a-vis what creates.
Just like when you're doing the oil with the fracked water, you get the...
Oh, there's a massive amount of sludge there is a massive amount of sludge.
I'm looking at positive, because you were saying you're selling salt for roads, you're extracting precious metals. Can you do the same thing with the seawater?
Are you going to sell the chloride?
Well, that answer is in the oil water separation technology, and this is a great question. There's a massive amount of sludge and I should have addressed that before, but a massive amount of sludge is created during that process. And we have a pellet reactor at the front end of the process stream. So we run all of that produced water through the pellet reactor, and we create calcium carbonate pellets, which we sell. And that comes to it makes about $5 million a year. Yeah, that's a great question, because there is a lot of sludge created in the produced water process. Ladies and gentlemen, there's another talk starting right now in this room. So we've got a little time? Okay. We got a little time still left, Jim said. So let's take a couple of questions and answers, and then please meet us at booth number 611, though, and pick up one of our brochures. That has our stock subscription agreement right in the back.
I'd like
Yes,
to
sir.
say a few words here.
Sure.
I've got a cousin here in the state who's a water expert. For years, he was in charge of the St. John's Waterway, and then he went down to the Southern Florida Waterway. And when I showed him the literature they gave me, I jumped at it. I'm one of the original investors.
Right. Thank you, sir. Thank you. We have 31 million on the total float, but only 16 million are outstanding. So we've been able to do everything. All of our fabrication, all of our R&D, all of our engineering has all been done on 16 million shares. Yes, sir.
What is the minimum investment at this point?
The question was, what is our minimum investment? Our folks have come in, ladies and gentlemen, anywhere from $7,500 on the low end, and now we have one gentleman that's come in for $1.7 million on the high end. So anywhere in between, whatever your comfort level is. Yes, sir.
Are you trying to go for the full 30, or what's your goal for the raising of the money? We only get 16, 17 now.
Yeah, that'll probably be fully subscribed by the time we get done. And the reason we did that is because we have not ascribed any shares to the founders of the company for reasons of nobody really knows what the contribute's going to be until you get to the end goal line. So the fairest way to do it is to get to the end goal line, get shareholder value, from making sure you've got your IPO ready to go. Then you can figure out what but you're exactly right. It'll probably fully be subscribed to 31 million.
Do you expect to get another
Yes.
15, $16 million in the next year, raising money?
Well, yeah, it'll happen from other entities that we're talking to right now. Because the major money has already been identified and committed, the other folks that were waiting in the wings, they want the rest of the shares. Yes, sir.
Thank you for your technical explanation, but for some of us that aren't exactly experts in
Oh, sure.
science, do you have any images of what you're talking about in the slideshow that you can show us?
We do. We have a major, in fact, we have a very nice electronic presentation of all of this, and that usually comes up on the full slideshow. But because we're doing a live stream, we were told that it would be better not to show the slideshow because of the live stream. So what we'd like to do is we'd like to send you an electronic presentation of a depiction of the technology. It gives you a very good graphic understanding of exactly how it's done. So all we need is your email, your name and your email address, and you can fill out on one of our cards at booth number 611, and we'll email that to you so you can look at it on your computer. Good question. The other thing that I should have mentioned to you folks, and is a huge, huge announcement for Reliable, is now we're cash flow positive. We bought a major saltwater injection facility, and you say, well, that's sort of counterintuitive. The reason why we did is because one of the things that we needed to satisfy the bank's due diligence for was that they wanted to know, how are you going to have 20,000 barrels a day of water coming into your recycling plant every single day? So they wanted to sort of a guarantee of where's the water going to come from. We went back to them and said, what if we bought the 4 largest trucking companies in Pennsylvania that have the master of service agreements to carry the water from the natural gas fields in Pennsylvania over to the saltwater injection wells in Ohio? And they said, we like that idea. That would raise our comfort level significantly. Our checkbook is open for you to go buy those 4 trucking companies. Well, the total purchase of those trucking companies is about $75 million, but they are significantly profitable in and of themselves. So we now have purchased one of the trucking companies on our own with our individual partners. The other 3 will be consummated at funding, but we also purchased the $3.6 million mid-size saltwater injection well in Ohio for this reason. it has 4,500 barrels a day of produced water contracted to it. So between the trucking companies that have 23,000 barrels a day in master service agreements contracted to them, and the 4,500 barrels a day contracted to the saltwater injection well in Ohio, we now have 27,500 barrels a day contracted to come to our recycling plant, which can only handle 20,000 barrels a day. So the bank said, well, you have redundancy in plenty, you're oversubscribed, you've satisfied our due diligence on that, we're ready to go. So that's really good news, is that we purchased the saltwater injection well for $3.6 million, then we purchased the trucking company for $6 million, but the trucking company revenues, since we've taken it on, have now virtually doubled. In the last 60 days that we've owned it, we've rehired the original manager. They know that we're going to be taking the water to a recycling facility. So now that the word is out in the industry, we've actually almost doubled the trucking company revenues. So we're going to be closing in on probably $10 million of revenues from the purchases that we just bought. So we're now in a revenue positive mode thanks to our original investors with a good base of assets, but nothing like what we're going to consummate with the recycling project once it's up and running. Yes, sir.
You have basic patents already issued on both
Yes.
processes?
Yes, both the desalination and the oil water separation.
I know they've already been issued. They're not
Yes. Yeah, well, I'll tell you what we did do though. We left it pending right now because our patent attorneys have told us that the best way to hide the technology right now is to not consummate the patent, because then you have to outline all your processes, all your blends, and all your designs. So anybody could go in and reverse engineer this, especially if you're a disingenuous Asian country. So the best way to protect it is to leave it as in pending right now until you issue your first commercial facility, and then once the first commercial facility is up and running, then we immediately pull the trigger on the patents. They're ready to go. Yes, sir.
If you're raising $31 million and you wanted to purchase $75 million of the trucking companies, is that a different company, or are you going to take loans out for that? What was the...
That's the financing from the bank. See, the bank is giving us the first tranche of...
Your loan up to $75 million?
Well, 216 million. Yeah, it's going to be 216. Yeah. Don't forget, they want the first plant, and then they want the first right of refusal on the second three. John?
So the 215 million in finance, 75 is going to the trucking companies. How much does a plant cost?
A plant costs 76 million.
We've got enough for 2 plants.
Well, some of that is going to be allocated for a slush fund, because the bank actually thinks that one of our immediate needs of capital is the minute we put up the first 20,000 barrel a day plant, they believe that we're going to need to put up a third module immediately. So that first plant, 20,000 barrels a day, is made up of two 10,000 barrel a day modules. They believe the moment that we put up the first plant, we're going to have to put up a third module. Because right now, every driller that we've spoken to said, we don't want to bring it to a saltwater injection well. We have the sword of Damocles hanging over our neck that we might be legislated out of existence at any moment, or we might have to carry our water farther and farther away, and we'll be left with no solution. But if we're bringing it to a recycling facility, we don't have any more liability regarding the water. We drop it off to you. So they're happy to pay us $5 a barrel when the lowest cost they have right now is $7.50 a barrel if they're close to Ohio. But the farther away from Ohio they are, we have players in northeast Pennsylvania paying $16 a barrel just to drop off produced water to a saltwater injection well in Ohio. But good question. Now the other folks are getting ready to come in. So we'll be at booth 611 though to talk to all of our partners. We did mention that, but we're at 53 cents a barrel, or a little under 53 cents a barrel to process and clean a barrel of produced water. And of course, Veolia's is $10.10. So I think we're in the right spot, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for coming here today and being with Reliable One Resources. Thank you, guys.